My name is Commander Vethcon of the 6th Dominion Battle Group, and I am going to tell you about the worst day of my military career. Not the most painful day, not the day I lost the most soldiers. I have had worse days by those measures, and I carry every one of them like stones in my chest. But the worst day, the day where everything I believed about warfare, strategy, mathematics, and the nature of intelligent life was quietly and methodically disassembled in front of me. That was the day I faced the humans. Let me give you context, because context matters. The 6th Dominion Battle Group comprised 47 warships. Not small ships, not patrol vessels. Warships built in the orbital yards above Keth Prime, assembled over 7 years by 12,000 engineers, crewed by some of the finest military minds the Dominion had ever produced. My flagship alone, the inexorable Calculation, displaced 4 million tons. Her main battery could strip the atmosphere from a small moon. Her point defense grid could track and intercept 40,000 simultaneous projectiles. Her AI, which we called simply the Accountant, had processing power equivalent to the combined computational output of 3 inhabited worlds. We were, by every objective measure, one of the most powerful military forces in this arm of the galaxy. The human fleet we encountered numbered 11 ships. 11. Our scouts had been tracking them for 6 standard days before the engagement. We knew their tonnage. We knew their weapon signatures. We knew their shield frequencies, their engine output, their crew complements. The Accountant ran the engagement probability model 412 times. 412 times it returned the same answer. The probability of a human tactical victory was 0.003%. My tactical officer, Sub-Commander Prida, had looked at that number and said, with the unshakable confidence of someone who has never been surprised by mathematics, "Sir, I believe the model is being generous." I had agreed. I want to find Prita someday and apologize to her. The engagement began at 3:40 standard hours, Dominion military time. We were in the Velthari corridor, a stretch of space between 2 dense nebulae that narrowed effective maneuvering room to approximately 40,000 kilometers across. It was strategically valuable for reasons I will not bore you with. The humans were blocking our passage. They had arrived 4 days before us and positioned themselves at the narrowest point of the corridor, a choke point that forced any approaching fleet to funnel through a gap barely wide enough for 3 of our ships to advance abreast. The Accountant noted this positioning and labeled it tactically suboptimal for a defending force of their size. The reasoning was sound. By holding the choke point, the humans gave up their mobility advantage. They would be stationary targets. What the Accountant did not consider, what none of us considered, was that the humans were not defending. They were baiting. We opened with a standard demand of passage, military courtesy. A formality, really, but the Dominion observes its formalities. The human response came back in 11 seconds. 11 seconds is extremely fast for an interstellar communication relay. It implied they had pre-written it. The message was as follows, and I am quoting it exactly from the battle record. "Commander Vethcon, we've read your file, impressive career. We're going to ask you professionally to turn your fleet around. We're not doing this for you, we're doing it for your crew. You seem like someone who actually cares about them. This is your only warning. Admiral Chen, Terran Expeditionary Force, TEF Unbroken." Prida had laughed. Not unkindly, she simply found it absurd. A fleet of 11 ships issuing a warning to 47. I had not laughed. I had read the message 3 times. Something about the phrasing, "we're not doing this for you," sat strangely in my mind. It implied consideration, deliberation. It implied they had thought about what was best for my crew before I had. I transmitted back, "Admiral Chen, your warning is noted, stand aside." 11 seconds later, noted. Just that one word. Then the humans did something our sensors had never seen before. What the accountant could not calculate. They turned off their shields. All 11 ships, simultaneously, shield signatures dropped to 0 across the board. My tactical station erupted. Prida was already running diagnostics, checking for sensor malfunction. The accountant began recalculating at a speed that made its processing indicators spike visibly on my command display. "Confirmed," Prida said, and I heard something new in her voice. Not fear, not yet, but its younger cousin, uncertainty. Human fleet has voluntarily dropped all defensive shielding. No malfunction detected on our end. Their power readings suggest the shield systems are still function. They have simply chosen not to use them. Why, I asked. Nobody answered, not because they were being insubordinate, because nobody knew. The accountant, when queried, returned a response I had never seen it produce in 14 years of service. Query: tactical rationale for human shield deactivation. Response: insufficient data, no precedent in tactical database, continuing analysis. Insufficient data. The accountant had never, in 14 years, said insufficient data. I made a decision I have spent considerable time second-guessing since. I advanced. 47 ships, forward formation, weapons hot. If the humans wanted to fight unshielded, we would give them the mercy of a quick engagement. The first thing they did was not fire their weapons. The first thing they did was split. 3 groups, 4 ships, 3 ships. They peeled away from the choke point in 3 directions simultaneously, not fleeing, not retreating, but spreading. Geometric, like they had rehearsed this 1,000 times. "They're running," Prita said. "No," I said, "they're not." I could not have told you why I said that. Instinct. 40 years of military experience generating a conclusion faster than my conscious mind could justify it. The humans were not running. Their engine output was too controlled. Their vectors were too precise. They were deploying. The accountant flagged it 0.4 seconds later. Human fleet formation change consistent with a deployment pattern, cross-referencing with known tactical databases. No match found. Continuing analysis. Again, no match found. All ships track the split groups, I ordered. Weapons free, prioritize the largest cluster. And then every communication channel on every ship in my fleet went white. Not jammed, white. There is a difference. Jamming produces static interference noise. What happened to our communications was something else. Every channel suddenly carried a single, clear, perfect signal. The same signal, simultaneously. It was music. Narrator note: pause here. Let the absurdity breathe. Then continue quietly. Human music. We had it in our database. The Dominion Intelligence Bureau had compiled cultural files on every species we had encountered, and humanity's music was extensive, strange, and deeply varied. This was something orchestral, strings and brass and percussion, building from quiet to enormous. Prida stared at her console. They've overridden our communication arrays, all frequencies. How did they? Find out later, I said. Reroute to backup. Backup is also broadcasting the signal, sir. So is the tertiary array. They've got all of them. I sat back in my command chair. The music swelled. And then one of my gunners, a young officer named Vasek, 2 years out of the academy on his first real deployment, said very quietly, "Sir, I know this piece. It's from their cultural archives. I think it's called O Fortuna. It's about the wheel of fortune, about fate turning, about the moment when everything changes." I looked at him. He looked pale. I looked back at my tactical display. The 3 human groups had completed their deployment. I finally understood the shape of what they had done. They had surrounded us. The geometry of 11. 47 ships. Surrounded by 11. I want you to understand how impossible that should have been. The Velthari corridor is 40,000 kilometers across. We were a fleet of 47 vessels spread across a significant portion of that space. For 11 ships to achieve effective encirclement of 47, outnumbered 4-1, was not merely difficult. It was mathematically reckless. The accountant said so explicitly. Human formation constitutes encirclement attempt with force ratio of 1:4, 27 in Dominion favor. Human forces are spread thin. Concentrated breakthrough at any vector will break encirclement with 97.3% probability. Recommend immediate thrust at vector 7 Baker. 97.3%. I gave the order. 12 of my ships formed up on vector 7 Baker, directly at the weakest point of the human encirclement, where only 2 human vessels held position. The math was simple: 12 against 2. Even unshielded, those human ships would be overwhelmed before they could inflict significant damage. We closed to firing range. The 2 human ships did not move. The accountant said, human vessels holding position, no evasive action, no power surge to weapons, they appear to be waiting. My lead gunship opened fire. The human ships still did not move. The shots hit, and the human ships, shieldless, absorbed direct hits from Dominion battle cannons and did not die. The accountant's damage assessment came back in fragments, each one more confused than the last. Preda's voice had lost all its professional steadiness. What are their ships made of? Nobody answered. What their ships were made of, we would learn later, much later in the quiet end. Embarrassing aftermath was something humans called reactive composite layering, a hull technology they had developed from first principles that absorbed and redistributed kinetic and energy impacts across the entire vessel structure rather than concentrating them at the point of impact. It was not a shield. It was something stranger, something that turned the ship itself into a shock absorber. They had been building it for 40 years. In secret. While their diplomatic representatives smiled and signed treaties, and attended cooperative conferences and brought banana bread. And then the human ships fired back. This is the part I find hardest to describe accurately, not because the tactical details are complicated, but because the emotional reality of it is difficult to convey to someone who was not there. The 2 human ships at Vector 7 Baker did not fire their main weapons. They fired what the accountant initially classified as secondary armament, light category, threat level minimal. What they actually fired were targeted electromagnetic pulses of a frequency we had never encountered, calibrated. We understood this only in retrospect, to the exact resonance frequency of Dominion shield generators. They knew our shield frequency. They had known it before the engagement began. Every ship they hit had its shields collapse, not damaged, collapsed, fully, instantly. The generators would restart, but it took 11 seconds during which a Dominion warship was as vulnerable as a paper boat in a storm. And the humans had timed their main weapons to fire in that window. 4 of my ships died in the first 6 seconds. The things they knew. The engagement lasted 22 minutes. I have reviewed the battle record many times since. I have had it reviewed by the Dominion War College, by 3 independent tactical analysis firms, and by a retired Saurian general who is considered the finest military strategic mind currently living. Every analysis reaches the same conclusion. The humans did not win by being stronger than us. They won by knowing us. They knew our shield frequencies, compromised, we believe, through a data breach that occurred 14 years prior, which we had considered inconsequential because the information had never been misused. Until now. They knew our communication protocols and had built a device specifically to exploit them. The music broadcast was not random. It was designed to create what human psychologists call cognitive disruption. Something about hearing unexpected emotional content during high-stress situations interrupts decision-making patterns. They had studied our biology closely enough to know it would work on us the same way it worked on them. They knew our tactical database was comprehensive but historically bounded, that we categorized and analyzed known tactics. So they used tactics that had never been used before, not because those tactics were necessarily superior, but because they would not appear in our database. Every time the accountant said, "No match found," that was a human victory before a single shot was fired. They knew our retreat protocols. On 3 occasions during the engagement, when my captains began executing what should have been unpredictable emergency withdrawal maneuvers, human ships were already positioned on our exit vectors. Already there. Waiting. I managed to reach Admiral Chen on a direct channel in the 14th minute. I do not fully know why. Perhaps to understand. Perhaps to find some flaw in what was happening, some mistake I could exploit. She answered immediately. Admiral Chen was a small woman by human standards, with gray at her temples and the kind of eyes that gave nothing away, not coldness, not warmth, just attention. Complete, total attention, the kind that made you feel she had already understood everything you were about to say. "Commander Vethkan," she said, "I hoped you'd call." "How?" I asked. It was not my most eloquent moment, but it was the only question that mattered. She looked at me for a moment. "We've been watching your fleet for 3 years," she said. "Not just your fleet, every engagement, every tactical pattern. We built models, we ran simulations." She paused. "We ran a lot of simulations. You couldn't have accounted for everything." "No," she agreed, "but we accounted for enough. Commander, can I ask you something?" I said nothing. She took that as a yes. "When you ran your probability models, did you account for the possibility that we wanted you to engage us here?" I thought about the accountant, about its 412 calculations, about its 0.003%. "No," I said. "That," she said quietly, "is the 0.003%. What humans are." I have thought about that conversation many times in the years since. That 0.003% was not a calculation error. It was not a flaw in the accountant's programming. It was not arrogance or negligence or any other comfortable explanation. It was a category error. The accountant, and every tactical system in every fleet in every civilization I had ever encountered, was built on a foundational assumption: that warfare is a puzzle with a correct solution, that the goal is to find the optimal path through probability space, and that a sufficiently powerful intelligence can find that path. We believed that intelligence could, in principle, calculate its way to certainty. The humans did not believe this. Or rather, they believed it, and then decided the belief was the enemy. Here is what I have come to understand about humanity in the years since the Velthari corridor. They are the only species I have encountered that actively studies its own cognitive biases and then weaponizes the knowledge. Every other species, when it becomes technologically sophisticated, builds systems that think better than its members, faster, more accurately, more comprehensively. The Dominion built the accountant. The Veth Collective built the harmony engine. The S-Saurians built the pattern of all patterns. All of these systems share a common architecture. They are built to reduce uncertainty, to calculate probability, to find the optimal path. Humans built systems like that too. And then they built a second layer of systems specifically designed to introduce uncertainty, to look at the optimal path and ask, what if we didn't take it? What if we did something the enemy's calculator doesn't have a category for? What if we made a move that looks suicidal? Because if it looks suicidal, no one will model it as a genuine option. They did not drop their shields because they were invulnerable. They dropped their shields because dropping their shields was not in our tactical database as a viable combat maneuver. It forced the accountant to recalculate from scratch. It bought them 14 seconds of our confusion. 14 seconds in their plan was enough. Because they had calculated exactly what we would do with those 14 seconds. There is a human philosopher I have read extensively in their literature since the engagement named Sun Tzu. He lived approximately 4,000 years ago by their calendar and wrote a short text on warfare that their military academies still teach today. The central insight of that text is this: all warfare is deception. Not skill, not strength, not technology. Deception. The humans have been living with that idea for 4,000 years. They have been arguing about it, testing it, refining it, building entire military traditions around it. While the rest of the galaxy was building bigger weapons and faster ships and smarter computers, humanity was asking a different question. Not how do we win, but how do we make them lose? The difference sounds small. It is not small, it is everything. The second warning. At the 19th minute of the engagement, I made the call no commander wants to make. I ordered full retreat. What remained of my fleet, 29 ships, of which 11 were severely damaged, began to withdraw from the Velthari corridor. The humans let us go. They could have pressed the engagement. Their ships were largely undamaged. Their encirclement was still holding. The accountant, even in its confused state, estimated they had a 67% probability of destroying an additional 12 to 15 of my vessels if they pursued. They did not pursue. They held position at the choke point and let us leave. And as my flagship passed the edge of their formation, Admiral Chen sent one final message. 11 seconds as before, pre-written. Commander Vethkan, I'm glad you and most of your crew made it out. I want you to know we take no pleasure in this. We fought because we had to, not because we wanted to. Please tell whoever sent you that we are not interested in being a threat to anyone. We are interested in being left alone. If that's not possible, if someone sends another fleet, we'll be ready. We always are. Safe travels. Admiral Chen. I read that message 5 times. I want you to notice what it does not say. It does not say we are weak and peaceful and no threat to you. That would be a lie, and Admiral Chen, whatever else she was not a liar. It does not say we are powerful and you should fear us. That would be a boast, and something about the human character, at least in my experience of Admiral Chen, seemed to find boasting distasteful. It says we are ready, we always are. 5 words that contain more genuine threat than anything the Dominion War College ever put in a strategic memo. Because it is not a threat about capability, it is a threat about state of mind. We always are. Not we will prepare if you attack again. Not we have reserves we haven't deployed. Always, present tense, continuous, as if readiness was not something they achieved but something they were. I thought about the 40 years of secret hull research. I thought about the communication array override they had built specifically to exploit our protocols. I thought about the fact that they had been watching every fleet engagement in this region of space for 3 years, building models, running simulations. I thought, how long have they been ready for a threat that hadn't appeared yet? I thought, what else are they ready for that we haven't imagined? What I brought home. I filed my report with Dominion High Command 62 days after the engagement. It was not a comfortable document to write. Military commanders are not rewarded for losing 18 ships to a force a quarter their size. There were inquiries. There were reviews. There were, behind closed doors, conversations that I was not invited to attend about whether Commander Vethkan had made critical tactical errors. The War College reviewed the engagement data and concluded that I had not made critical tactical errors. They concluded that no tactical errors, critical or otherwise, would have changed the outcome. That conclusion did not make anyone feel better. What I brought home from the Velthari corridor, beyond the dead, beyond the damaged ships, beyond the career setback, was a question that I have not been able to stop asking in the years since. What are humans for? Every species in the cooperative has a story about what they are. The Dravathi are diplomats. Their culture is built around negotiation, around the resolution of conflict through language. The Saurians are builders. Their defining national projects are always construction, always expansion, always the making of new things. The Veth collective are seekers. Their highest cultural value is knowledge, and their greatest heroes are scientists and explorers. What are humans? They have diplomats. Remarkable ones. I have met several and been outmaneuvered by all of them. They have builders. Their engineering accomplishments in the decades since first contact have been extraordinary. They have scientists who have made genuine contributions to fields they had only recently discovered. But none of those things, when I try to describe humanity to someone who has not met them, feel like the center. The center, as best I can articulate it, is something like this. Humans are the species that refuses to accept the answer. Every other civilization, when it encounters a probability model that says 0.003%, updates its plans, finds a different approach, accepts the mathematics. Humans look at 0.003% and ask, but what would it take? And then they go figure out what it would take. And then they do that thing. I have a theory, it is only a theory, and I hold it loosely, about why they are this way. Humanity's homeworld, Earth, is by galactic standards a remarkably violent and unstable environment. Seismic activity, extreme weather, a biosphere that, until very recently in their history, was actively competing to kill them in a variety of imaginative ways. A significant percentage of the planet's species are venomous. Several are large enough to eat a human without difficulty. Humans are not, by themselves, well equipped for this environment. They are not fast. They are not strong, not compared to many of their planet's predators. They have no natural armor, no venom, no exceptional sensory capabilities. What they have is a brain that refuses to stop solving. 11,000 years of cooperative history. No species in that history had to fight, tooth and nail, against their own planet just to survive long enough to develop civilization. Most inhabited worlds are gentler than Earth. Most species evolved in environments that were challenging but not actively hostile. Humans evolved in a war. Against their climate, against their predators, against each other, extensively, painfully, in conflicts so numerous and varied that their history reads like a tactical encyclopedia. They carry that war inside them. It does not make them violent. I want to be clear about that, because the Dominion's early assessments made that mistake, and it is a costly mistake. Humans are not more aggressive than other species. They are more persistent. The war never made them killers. It made them survivors. And survivors, when they look at a 0.003% probability, do not see an impossibility. They see a problem to be solved. The last entry in the battle record. I am retired now. The Dominion gave me a comfortable pension and a nice apartment on Keth Prime with a view of the orbital yards where my old ships were built, which I suspect was either a kindness or a joke. I have not decided which. I spend my time reading human literature mostly, their history, their philosophy, their science fiction, which I find particularly interesting because of all their art forms. It is the one that most directly reflects how they think about the future, about what might exist, about what they might become. They have always imagined the stars. For thousands of years, before they had any means of reaching them, they wrote stories about going there, about the species they might meet, about the wars they might fight, about the political structures that might govern a galactic civilization. Reading it now, knowing what I know, is a strange experience. Because in a significant percentage of their stories, humanity loses. They wrote stories about being conquered, being colonized, being eaten, being enslaved, being pushed aside by bigger, older, wiser species who looked at these fragile, short-lived, emotionally chaotic creatures and dismissed them. They imagined the ways they might fail. And then in the other stories, the ones that gave the genre its name, the ones their readers love most passionately, they wrote their way back. They imagined what it would take, and they made humanity do that thing. I have come to believe that this is what makes them dangerous. Not their weapons, though their weapons are formidable. Not their ships, though their ships are now things my old self would not have believed. Not their numbers, though they breed faster than most species and their population is growing. What makes them dangerous is that they have been practicing. For thousands of years, in books and stories and imaginings, they practiced being defeated and rising again. They practiced facing the impossible and finding the 0.003%. They practiced making the galaxy take them seriously. And when the real galaxy finally showed up, when first contact happened and humanity stepped onto the actual stage of interstellar civilization, they were not surprised. They had been waiting. They had been ready. They always are. The last entry in the official battle record of the Velthari engagement reads as follows. Engagement concluded. Dominion's 6th Battle Group withdrew at 4:02 Standard Hours. Human forces did not pursue. Recommendation. Further engagement with Terran expeditionary forces requires comprehensive reassessment of all tactical assumptions. Addendum, filed by Commander Vethcon, personal notation. We were not defeated by their weapons. We were defeated by their homework. Their homework. 47 warships, the finest military technology the Dominion could produce. The accountant, 14 years of my career. Defeated by homework. I don't find it humiliating anymore. I find it extraordinary. And that, friends, is the story of the Velthari engagement, as told by the commander who lost it. What strikes me every time I come back to a story like this isn't the battles or the ships or the weapons. It's that line, we were defeated by their homework. Because that's humanity, isn't it? Not the strongest, not the fastest, not the oldest. Just the one that did the reading. If this story found something in you, something that made you sit up a little straighter, something that reminded you why you're proud to be human, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to HFY Universe. New stories every week. And if you've got a favorite HFY story you want me to narrate, drop it in the comments below. The galaxy isn't done with us yet. Stay human, I'll see you next time.